Please leave a comment where you are watching from. If I had known she was wanting to end her life, I would have tried to get help, but I refused to accept any blame for decisions that I did not make. One night in high school, I went to a pool party about 20 minutes away. Probably like 80 to 90 people from a lot of different schools were there. I stood around talking to some guys I recognized from water polo. We told random stories about games, complained about refs, and laughed about stuff that always happens at practice. I was having a good time. Then a girl came by, put her arm on my shoulder, and said, "Hey tough guy, what's your name?" In my 23 years, it's happened very few times that a girl at a party has come up to me and wanted to talk, and that was one of them, so I was excited. She pulled me away from the squad, and we introduced ourselves. I thought she had the hots for me, but she took me over to someone else who was standing alone, and said, "I want you to meet my friend Sophia," not her real name. The first girl left really soon after that, implying that Sophia and I should hang out with each other. Sophia went to school in the opposite direction, about half an hour away from me. We chatted for a minute or two, but I wasn't interested and I wanted to go back to the water polo squad. I thought it would be rude to leave Sophia by herself, so I asked her if she wanted to talk to the squad. She said no. I said it was nice meeting her and that I was going back. Sophia stopped me on my way out and asked for my number. I said, "No, but it was nice meeting you." The next Thursday, I got a text that said, "Hey, this is Sophia. Christina introduced us at the party last week. You seem like a cool guy. How about we see a movie tomorrow night and get dinner?" She had found my number somehow and wasn't afraid to use it. I responded, "No thanks. I'm not interested." I got similar messages each week, along with memes and random texts/jokes. I gave her the same response twice, then I stopped responding, and finally I blocked her after about 4 weeks of giving her the shoulder. One day, someone told me they heard that a girl named Sophia, last name, at another school had killed herself over being rejected by me. I Googled her name, and some local news stations had reported on the suicide. I looked up her name on Facebook and saw she was tagged in so many posts mourning the loss. I have no idea how, but people had somehow heard it was over a rejection, which was being referenced in a lot of those posts. Thank God no one called me out by name. I wasn't anonymous either. I started getting really angry messages, calls, and even voicemails from people I didn't know saying how it was all my fault, that I should have given her a chance, and that an innocent young girl is dead over my thoughtlessness. I had to deactivate my Facebook and change my number since I was getting so many angry messages. Thank God people who knew her lived so far away. Otherwise they might have shown up at my front door too. I feel terrible that Sophia ended her life. Anyone's suicide is really sad. I wish Sophia would have gotten help and moved on with her life. That said, no one should ever be pressured into taking someone out on a date, and I will never apologize for saying no to her. In my life, I've only been on 2 bad first dates. One was when I was in high school, so I don't even know that it counts. The other was as an adult. High school bad date because dinner was at McDonald's, even though he knew ahead of time I was a health-required vegetarian. Since we are all over 30 here, you'll probably remember that MCDs didn't have a veggie patty option back in the day. We went to see Shakespeare in Love as our next activity, and he spent the entire second half of the movie whispering to me about Goop's breasts. For those who haven't seen the movie, Goop cross-dresses so that she can be a Shakespearean actor, but she and Will S. fall head over heels for one another, and there's a scene where he undoes her binder. It's the only nudity in the movie. Went to a coffee shop to close out the night. I was 0 caffeine back then as an attempt to control my ADHD without having to medicate. This particular coffee shop didn't have non-CAF options. While chatting at the coffee shop where I managed to get a tap water, we were discussing our lives, and it turned out we were both auditioning for the same spot on an improv comedy team. He told me that I should withdraw from consideration because a girlfriend does not upstage her boyfriend, and this on a first date. I informed him of all the information necessary to have not made the dietary blunders ahead of time. I cannot speak to the movie decorum blunder that didn't require any special information from me to know not to make. The threat blunder, either. Adult bad date. We went to a speakeasy, though I'm a beer girl, which I had identified ahead of time. The speakeasy didn't serve beer, only fancy cocktails. The bartender decided to mansplain the chemistry of the cocktail to me, a person with a chemistry degree, and as is consistent with the term mansplain, got some key details wrong. My date took umbrage with me gently correcting the bartender, mixologist, so that he might not err in the future. At one point during the evening my phone rang, unplanned. My date said, "Go ahead and take it. I know you little ladies have schemes to pretend to be needed in order to have an excuse to leave if the date is unsafe. You can tell your friend that I'm a perfect gentleman." After concluding the phone call I asked him, "What makes you think that I'd be worried for my safety? What makes you think that of the two of us at this table, you're the most dangerous one?" I was curious about his views on gender, but from his face it was clear that this was the wrong question to ask, and he was already putting me in the no category. Reading the room, I went to the bathroom in order to make a polite exit to what was clearly a date that had worked for screening purposes. The soap dispenser in the bathroom was a long, flexible tube filled with white pearlescent soap that the hand washer was meant to milk in order to get any soap for hand washing. This 100% hit me in my sense of humor because it looked all the world like a condom, and giving it a handjob was how one got white liquid to squirt from its tip. Please tell me you are with me on this one. Anyway, I came out of the bathroom and as a parting gesture, shared my observations. He got actually huffy about how lowbrow I could be in such a fine establishment with clearly the most refined of taste. I was upfront about my personality, preferences, views on gender equality, and so on before the date he planned without allowing me any information nor revisions. It was quite clear to me that he was running me through his ideal date scenario, but was clearly slow on the uptake because our pre-date communication ought to have revealed to him that I'd failed to be the demure, proper, cocktail-sipping lass who would never see the penis connection with the soap dispenser and saw all men as big, horribly scary creatures. What makes a date bad? Finding myself in the kind of bizarro world where I want to find a mic and tap it and ask, "Is this thing on?" Because all the key components of the date were items that were discussed ahead of time where my input was completely disregarded. Were they attempts at boundary violations? The person I was on a date simply being a one-trick pony unable to have flexibility and run a different play? I don't know and I don't want to know. Things that were first dates that didn't proceed to second dates include the guy who admitted that he was still living with and caring for his ex-wife because he felt a sense of duty to her, and oh by the way he was also polyamorous. Translation in his case: "Hi, I'm still married and my wife doesn't know what's up, but I'm hoping you won't attempt to make contact with her, because you are a poly person who doesn't need to meet your metamours this early." I thank him for being upfront with his red flag, and the activities of the date absolutely showed that we were both capable of listening to the other one's preferences. The guy with blessedly unmasked autism, who info-dumped about the Star Wars extended universe for the entire date, and I couldn't get a word in edgewise. God help me, I love someone passionate about things, and while I wasn't knowledgeable to follow all of what he had to offer, I was so happy to be audience to his passion, and so happy to meet someone passionate about things. Would have been a second date, too, had he not admitted to carrying around a live grenade as a good luck charm. I did not want to go boom. The guy I met on Amtrak when neither he nor I were traveling to our hometown, yet both he and I shared the same hometown, who shared a name with a Seinfeld character. It was one of those meet cuties, except we just didn't vibe in the way we needed to. The guy who spent the better part of our date spouting extreme right-wing political talking points and championed policies that endorsed white supremacy, yet I was the only white person on our date, and I'm the liberal. You think Dave Chappelle's blind, black KKK guy is a total fiction, but I swear they exist in subtler forms. Because we had mutual friends, I know how his story ends. He married a white woman at a NASCAR event surrounded by Confederate flags. I was shown the wedding photo. The guy who spent the first half of the date telling me how I was his fetish-made flesh and identifying his ex-girlfriend to me. I realized I knew her because there are only so many of us in the area that match as many of my demographics as were his fetish, and then spent the other half of the date trying to connect with my history as a water quality chemist by telling me how he knows science about water too. And what science does he know about water? That water has a memory, and if frozen into a particular ice cube shape, will remember that it was frozen into that shape, and so impart healing properties to someone who drinks it as liquid water after. Phew the woo. I was already a nope about him by the end of the date, but I hit up his ex-girlfriend just to hear her input, and she confirmed all the independent conclusions I'd come to. I really wished I'd figured it out as quickly as you did. It would have saved me a year, were her parting words. The guy who thought the color green could cure syphilis, and told me that he spends an hour a day under a green lamp for his health. Because you have syphilis? I asked. I'm not telling, he responded with a wink. My sexual health says no thank you to that risk. The sadist for whom pairing with a masochist was a non-negotiable. I'm not a masochist. Why this didn't come up before the date, I don't know. I could have saved us both time. But we had other things in common, and I left with someone who would become a few years' worth of friend. The guy who I walked out the door of the date location and into the door of my doctor, also in urgent care, conveniently located in a strip mall with a really good restaurant, because he had extremely advanced strep throat and his fever was off the charts and he was doing a "I'm a man, I don't need healthcare" thing. He was embarrassed about it, and it was he who chose to discontinue dating. Quite a few guys who were recently divorced and had a wife-shaped hole in their life that were rushing to plug up. And then a bunch of perfectly normal blokes besides, where we just didn't vibe. I settled down with a guy I met online, but not through old. It's sort of a meet cute. We both were invited separately to a massive, multiplayer online pub quiz / bar trivia event by separate real-life friends who had attended an earlier iteration of the pub quiz, and both of us almost didn't attend. We didn't interact with one another. It was just that, at the end of the quiz, it was announced by one of the participants that an online escape room was being trialed at a later time and date. Both he and I love a good escape room and a good puzzle hunt. So we both attended that online escape room beta, at which point we did interact. I liked his brain in that he seemed to be my perfect complement. In solving puzzles at the point I would get stumped, he would suddenly become clear and able to see the solution or vice versa. I decided that was enough to make offers of internet friendship, and he accepted my contact info and then made contact. Though he initially annoyed the ever-living bejesus out of me with his attention to detail, whereas I'm a sufficient-is-passing kind of person, we built a friendship and then ultimately developed feelings for one another. Our first date was grocery shopping together, where once again our brains harmonized, yay vibe, and we both discovered that we liked the look of one another and that webcams and screens did neither of us any favors. We kissed at the end of that date. Now we live together and have a baby on the way. So we were going to meet after I returned from visiting family out of state for the holidays, but decided to meet up the other day. We were going to go out to an event and eat there, but due to scheduling he suggested that we order takeout and eat at my place, then go to the event later. I was like, that's not a good idea. 1. I live in a very, very small apartment. It's meant for one, and to save space I only have a bed, computer table / dining table, computer chair to sit on. It's not made for guests, and I definitely did not want him on my bed for fear that things would progress in a direction I didn't want and I'd have to kick him out. 2. I was not prepared to have people over, and it was not cleaned in a way I'd like. We discussed this during dinner again as well, and my answer is still the same, no. He asks if I want to come over his house, still no. So we go to the event, eat, then we to my place so he can drop me off. We sit in the car for a little bit, and of course he want to make out. I'll try to take the lead, but he just right goes for tongue shoving. I keep trying to start off with closed lips, but every time I go his mouth is always open, and it's just straight up tongue, face swallowing, tongue, over and over again. He made a comments about how I was doing duck lips, and in my head I'm just thinking it's because I tired of you licking my face and doing giant open mouth kisses. He kept holding my head, so sometimes I couldn't even back off or tilt my head. I don't understand, it was so much worse that before. At one point he asks how my sexual health is, and then explains he's healthy and has been tested. I stare at him blankly for a moment, because what does that have to do with us? He already licked my face, so if either of us had HSV-1 or 2 it's too late for this conversation. Plus, we're not having sex of any kind. This too had been discussed at length. Then he says something else even more out of place. Something like, I have something I've been holding in that I need to release. I stare blankly again, then ask him to clarify, because it sounds like some sexual innuendo. Nope, apparently he has to pee, but can't ask like a normal person. Ugh. I hesitate because my gut reaction is that it's just a ploy to get into my apartment. I should have listened to my gut, but I didn't feel comfortable telling him no, or to use the gas station a couple of blocks away. We go to my apartment. Now I've already discussed twice why I don't want to hang out in my apartment. He goes to the bathroom, and I'm hanging out, standing up because I'm basically waiting to escort him out and tell him goodnight. He comes out and gets chatty, asks for a tour. Then he asks for a drink. Starts trying to make out and comments how it's better than the car. Why don't we sit down? I'm like, no, not sitting on my bed, so I get back up. In his mind, I guess no bed sitting means let's go on the floor. I have tile, y'all. It's not a comfortable to sit or lay unless you're laying on something. He slides down on the floor and pulls me down to join him. More awkward kissing, and I happened to open my eyes to see his mouth wide open and his tongue out. I close my eyes back. I keep pulling back because he keeps licking my face. I'm still wearing what I wore out, tight jeggings/skinny jeans. He suggests why don't I get into something more comfortable, but I tell him nope, otherwise I'd be going to bed, and he wouldn't be here. Then I experience something weird. When I pull my face back the last 2 times, he just looked different to me. Like it wasn't his normal, friendly face, like he looked different, and it scared me. It was subtle, but I don't know. I think about my phone that's over by the door, not within reach, and I worry if I'm going to have a hard time getting this guy out. I stop and tell him we need to call it a night. He lives and that it, thank God. I text him this morning basically saying that it's not going to work out. This didn't happen during the date, but after our one and only date. This happened almost 15 years ago. I was working abroad at the time, and I met an incredibly aesthetically pleasing lady at a coffee shop and absolutely had to chat her up. We exchanged numbers, and we went out for drinks later that week. While the date went off all right, I felt like something wasn't quite right, so I told her at the end of the night that I had a great time, but I didn't think we had much in common. She seemed okay with this fact, thanked me for my honesty, and we parted ways with a hug. A couple days later, I get a text as I'm leaving the office from her asking if I can meet up because she needed to talk to someone. I'm not going to be jerk and say no, especially since she sounded desperate, so I told her to meet me at the coffee shop where we first met. She showed up with a suitcase, looking incredibly disheveled and obviously having recently cried. We sat down to start talking, and she started telling me how she was in a bad place, got involved with a lot of hard drugs, was turning tricks on the street to fund said drugs, and just got kicked out by her mom. While I'm trying to absorb the deluge and not choke on my coffee, she asked if she could stay with me. Nope. I told her I wasn't comfortable with the idea since we didn't know each other, and asked if she had anyone else to turn to, which led to more crying. We were starting to cause a scene, so I then offered to get a room for her at one of the local hotels, using my travel points, but she didn't have to know, so that she could at least have a place for the night while she sorted things out. She accepted on the condition that I at least stay a while with her for comfort. We check in, head to the room, and sit down to start talking some more. I then realize that it's relatively late and I have to get up early for work, so I make these facts known. She breaks down some more, which leaves me conflicted to the point that I reluctantly stay, and I tell myself that I have a pretty good excuse for my boss in the morning. A few more hours later, I really need to get to sleep, so I tell her that I'm just going to sleep in the one bed so I can get some rest before my day starts and she can have the other bed to herself. She goes to start getting ready for bed, and I fall fast asleep. I wake up roughly 30 minutes later, probably around 4 a.m.-ish, incredibly groggy, but something is definitely not right. I'm still trying to focus because I slept in my contacts, so my eyes are taking a minute to adjust. There's an arm draped around me. Why do I feel wet and sticky? Then I notice all the red. She cut herself and crawled into bed with me. Instant panic mode. It took everything I had to swallow my heart a couple times as it desperately attempted to escape. I called down to the front desk asking where the nearest hospital was. No time to explain. I'll pay for the room, etc. I don't remember carrying her out to the car, wrapped in the drenched bedsheets, nor do I remember the drive to the hospital. I only remember carrying her through the front door and yelling for help. The staff rushed over and took her away, and I was immediately sat with 2 officers and a nurse doctor, who started asking me a lot of questions. I answered as honestly as I could, but noticed my peripheral was starting to turn black, then fainted. I eventually came to, and so did the girl. Thankfully, she corroborated my side of the story and that there was no foul play. I don't want to know what would have happened otherwise considering I was a foreign national on a work visa. I've avoided talking to girls in coffee shops since. I had been chatting with a girl on a dating site. We decided to meet for a date. I went. She was there at the prearranged meeting spot. Now, I get that we generally want to look our best in the profile pics on a dating site. But nice clothes, makeup, and appealing angles is one thing. This girl was one of those that looked like a completely different person IRL, and you only saw the similarities to the photos after a few minutes. Okay, not starting off well. It turns out reality her is actually quite frumpy compared to internet her. But that didn't matter because I shit the bed the very first thing I did anyway. I wanted to seem confident, so I strode up to her and with an upbeat tone said, "Hi, you must be Sarah." She just looked at me for several seconds before saying, "It's Emily." I have no idea how I fucked that up. I knew her name was Emily, and was not even talking to anybody named Sarah. This was back in the early 2010s, and Neil Strauss, The Game, had just entered the public conscience. For the record, I will say I tried reading that book like 3 times to see what all the fuss was about, but always gave up after less than 1/3 of the book. It simply sucks as a book. Well, Sarah or Emily, or whatever the fuck, had apparently studied The Game intently to protect herself from any of its devilries, and despite my profuse apologies, she was adamant that I had tried one of the negging strategies from the book. We went for a walk in a park and tried making conversation, and it went badly all the way. We passed a little beer garden type place. Ah, thought I to myself, surely some alcohol can smoothen out the evening for us a bit. I suggest we go in for a beer and she agrees. Time for my next wrong turn. She was making zero effort, and I was too young and dumb to call it quits when I should. Instead I sat there and tried to improve our rapport, but she was making zero effort, and instead I made the classic mistake of drinking more to try and make her more interesting. So after a bit I am too drunk to handle anything smoothly, and certainly way more drunk than she was. Time for my fuck-up finale. In a last-ditch effort to try and make her interesting, I suggest that perhaps we go back to my place and smoke some pot. She squinted her eyes at me in anger and said her brother was an addict, and it all started because he liked weed. At this point my senses finally caught up to me, and I said, "Well, I think we can both agree this has been a shit evening for the both of us. How about we call it a night and go our separate ways?" She just said, "Yeah." We paid and walked out without even saying goodbye to each other. Another story for you here. Met a girl at a bar and had some fun dancing and talking with her, so we exchanged numbers and made plans to meet up the following Friday to have a coffee date. I figured it would be nice and quiet, and we could really talk and get to know one another. The morning after meeting, I woke up to 7 texts from her ranging from like 6 a.m. to 9 a.m. when I woke up. I was a university student who didn't have class that day, so I'm naturally sleeping in. Anyway, she would text me like every 15 minutes asking, "What are you doing?" Or some variation of it. I'd say studying, or whatever, and she would say, "I'll bug you later." Sounds good, right? Let me study and do my thing, and we'll talk later. Well, sure enough, later is 15 minutes later, and we do the same old song and dance. Wednesday rolls around, and I stay after class to do a group project with my classmates. In the group are 2 ladies and 1 other dude with me for a total of 4. What are you doing? Text and said doing a group project. She said send me a pic. And me being naive and dumb did it. She went on a rant that would rival a parent yelling at their kid. She said, "You are not to hang out with other women without me present, do you understand? I don't care if it's for school or for social reasons, you are not to be out with other women without me there." When I read that, I considered just telling her that I was done and not going on the date. I figured I'd made a commitment, so I followed through on the date, and it was the biggest joke. As we sat down, I asked her what was up with that rant from Wednesday. She said, "What rant?" And I showed her the texts about her going off on me about being with other girls. For school. And she basically said, "I didn't say that." I said, "Dude, your texts are right here," giving her a chance to retract that statement. But she doubled down and said, "I didn't say that." I got up, said good luck, and left. She tried following me out to my car and blocking me from getting in the car, and I said, "Move, or I'm calling the police." She refused to move, so I got out my phone and walked back into the coffee shop. She then got in her car and left, and I left and figured that was the end of it. No, it wasn't. The funny thing is, she insisted on picking me up, but I kept declining and said I'd drive myself. Odds are she knew where I lived already because she was super creepy and weird, but I wasn't going to volunteer that information. I drove mostly so I wouldn't have her pick me up and to also be able to leave when I wanted to. I met this guy on Hinge, and we hit it off so quick and everything was going so good, we spoke for months and would call and message 24/7. He always had a problem with following and feeling the need to entertain girls, which was an issue for me, and I would bring it up a lot as a concern. He would go mad on me and tell me that they're just colleagues and that I was getting mad for no reason. Anyway, I started looking into these people, and they were in all different countries. So when I asked what his job is for them to be around the world, and he told me he worked in high tech at Google, I forgot the exact role. 3 months go by, and we are still great. He then asks me to be his girlfriend through a cute Spotify album. And being crazy and delusional, I said yes so soon. We hadn't even met. This followed with him telling me he he loves me for the first time a couple days after. After this honeymoon stage, he had stopped being as loving, wouldn't let me go out to certain places, and wanted to know every single one of my movements. This man also wanted marriage, he is Muslim. Anyway, he would get on and off with me, and his mood would always affect mine, which was most of the time bad. Constantly making me feel worthless. Anyway, I stayed with him. Then he disappears. Without reasoning, all his accounts disappeared. And I was left clueless and crying and whatever. This went on for a week. All his accounts were gone and untraceable. He then comes back onto his accounts after a week. I message asking pretty much WTF, and he claimed that I was talking to other men at the beginning of the relationship. I can confirm this did not happen. So I called him and spent hours reassuring him that it never happened, but he acts all stubborn about it and says he doesn't believe me. Eventually, after time, things get better. Things were good with us again, but he started to drift away and claimed that he was just really busy with work and everything else. So when I brought it up, he immediately made it out to be my problem and fault and argued with me, saying that I was asking for too much just from wanting to talk to him. He would cause arguments all the time if I brought up even one thing that bothered me. Anyways, after time, he unfollows the girls that I asked and removes his socials from his TikTok bio because I said that he doesn't need his Snapchat there because he doesn't need to snap other girls. This is great, but it lasted about a week before he was back to it again. He had followed a girl in Australia, which I wasn't comfortable with, but said she is a colleague. However, she had just finished high school, so would not work for Google. He was just full of lies. Even his sisters would compliment and ask about me to him, and I began to learn Arabic for him so that I could talk with his mom. We had not met at this point yet, as he said that we can meet in the new year due to his lack of holiday at work. I said fine and prepared for when I did see him, saving money to get my hair done, nails done ECT. January is here, and there is no sign of him making any plans whatsoever, and when I ask about it, he shuts me down. So I just think whatever and wait. He then continues to follow girls, and when I ask why, it turns into a big argument, and he says that I'm too much for him, and that he needed space. While I'm emotional and heartbroken, I search though his TikTok following with another account I have, specifically for this. And I get recommended a profile with him on it. This profile has a different name, different Snapchat, different Instagram, different location, and loads of girls in his following. He had a double life and another girlfriend. So despite us being on a break, I called him a lot, and he didn't pick up, so I sent him voice notes telling him that I knew about these accounts and the lies. This man also didn't work at Google, he worked at Lidl, and he didn't even live where he said he did. He listened to the voice notes and then blocked me, as he had been caught. This was 8 months of a relationship lie. The craziest part is that I've seen a picture of his ID with the name I thought was his, but I don't even know his real name, or who he really is. I want to tell my story after a series of crappy relationships/dating ventures. I'm 27, been in a few relationships, but none of them have lasted long enough to be considered long-term. I've been love-bombed, pressured/coerced into bed, ghosted, and outright disrespected by almost every guy I've been with. This is a long one, but trust me, it's a must-read. I've heard that the guys I pick are usually a reflection of how I view myself, and yes, I agree, but to a certain extent. Most of the guys I've been with have faked being a good guy up until we both got comfortable. Then they started showing their true colors. I used to love myself when I was single. I wouldn't even seek out a relationship because I was so happy by myself. Somehow I'd always get sucked into the dating world by a guy that was charming enough to catch my attention. I think after so many failed attempts at dating and trying to form a healthy relationship, I've began to hate myself. I've started thinking, what is it about me that makes it so hard for men to stay with me? Because of that, I've taken lots of time to rebuild myself and look deep into my own flaws to see what I did wrong in past relationships and try to fix it. In one of those relationships, I was taking it too serious, and he so obviously wasn't. In the next relationship, I was emotionally unavailable for the majority of it BC. I was going through grief. In the next one, I was ready for a healthy relationship, and he made it seem like he was too by love bombing me. I fell for it BC. I had never felt so loved. Then I woke up to a phone call saying he wasn't used to being loved the way I loved him and ghosted. I was devastated. I swore off dating for a year and a half after that. That happened in August 23rd. I tried healing a lot of childhood trauma because I realized it was directly tied to the type of men I picked. It worked. I healed myself in ways I didn't think I could heal. Fast forward to now, I've decided that I'm open to dating again. I'm not actively seeking it out, but if it finds me, I'm open to seeing where things go. The only difference now is that I only want to date intentionally. I don't want to give myself to someone that I'm not sure is going to last long. I have a lot of love to give, so I'm not going to give it out to just anyone anymore. Over the past month or so, I've been asked on 2 dates, and while both went well, at the end they expressed that they were only looking for something more along the lines of friends with benefits. I immediately said no thanks, it's not for me, and left it at that. Then one night as I was getting home, I got a call from an unknown number. I usually don't answer unknown numbers, but this time I was waiting for a call from a family friend that was buying a painting from me, so I assumed it was them. I answered, and the first thing that came from their mouth was, "Am I a crappy person?" I didn't recognize the voice at first, so I said, "Who's this?" And he said, "You know who it is." In that moment I realized that I did in fact know who it was. It was the guy that ghosted me after love bombing me for months, and getting me to fall so deeply in love with him. I guess you could say he was my first love. I froze and stayed quiet as he rambled on about how he knows he was shitty for ghosting me. He went on, then started saying how he realized he was seeking the ways I loved him in every woman he was with since, and none of them would show him that same love, so he'd be left with thoughts of me. I was shocked, to say the least. I had to keep reminding myself that this was the man that love bombed me, and that's probably what he was trying to do again. The more he talked, the more I thought I'd fall for it. The more I realized how easy it was to talk to him for hours and hours with no awkward silence. How I loved when he'd sing to me, even though he didn't have the best singing voice. How he'd send me the songs with lyrics that fit our situation so perfectly. I found myself falling into his trap once again. We ended up talking on the phone for 7 hours. I was so disappointed in myself for it, and he knew it. He kept saying things like, "I'm sure you're hating how easy it is to talk to me. Trust me, I don't get it either." I was blinded once again. His words struck something in me, and for some reason, in the moment I believed him. Then we ended the phone call. As soon as we did, I had a heavy pit in my stomach. I felt this indescribable feeling. After sleeping on it, I woke up to a phone call from him. Just like he used to, he called me on the way to work just to say good morning. We hung up after saying good morning, and I knew exactly what that pit was in my stomach. The feeling of impending doom. Days passed, and every day, I realized that when he ghosted me, he had done damage to me that can't be reversed by triggering the one thing I thought I had mostly healed in that 1.5 years since we last talked. He triggered my abandonment issues, and talking to him again was making those issues come back up. I was starting to wonder if any of what he said was true. I was wondering when he'd ghost me again, guessing it'd be in a few days to a week. Then I began thinking, what if I just leave him before he leaves me? Surely it'd be less painful this time. So that's what I did. I stopped replying, and he stopped replying too. Then I had a sense of relief. Then a sense of sadness. Then a sense of what could have been. A few days later, I woke up to a long text from him, saying how he wanted to try things out with me one last time. He feels like he's the odd man out in his friend group. BC. They are settling down and getting married to the women they've been with for a long time. He said he wants to settle down with a woman that will be a good wife to him, and he thinks that's what I would give him. What he doesn't get is, as I'm reading his words, I'm thinking, so he wants to settle for me just BC. I've shown him in the past that I'd do wifely things for him. And yes, maybe I'm wrong for thinking this way, but the way he worded it made me think of it that way. My future husband will want me, not just for the wifely things I'd do for him, but for other things too. He'd want me for my wits, my intelligence, and my thought process. He'd want me for the little habits I have, and the little things I appreciate. He'd want me for the platonic things too. BC, I believe a relationship has to also be a companionship as well, and not everything has to be romantic or sexual. The guy texting me the wifely things he wants from me, such as cleaning, cooking, and giving him love in a physical touch sort of way, is not my future husband. He doesn't truly see me for who I am. For that reason, I tell him I'm not the one he will settle down with, and I'm sure as hell not going to be the one he's going to settle for. And as if the universe couldn't have screamed it any louder for me to hear, I have this overwhelming sense of relief, and the pit of impending doom in my stomach has gone away. I laughed. Trust me, universe, I know. That's why I'm back at square one, trying to heal yet another part of me, so I can become the best version of myself, not only for myself, but for my future husband. My future partner. So future partner, if you're somehow reading this, whether it's in the future or right now, I hope you know how much work I'm putting into myself for you and me. I hope we meet soon. I really wanted to make a good impression on my first attempt at Tinder. His name was Jake, the guy I finally matched with. Jake seemed nice, looked fairly tall, funny, and had this rugged outdoorsy charm and a solid bio. Tick tick tick. I mean, come on. He was hot, he loved tacos, and he wasn't afraid to meet in person? That's a rare find in the Tinder jungle. We messaged back and forth for a few days, and it was effortless. His sense of humor matched mine perfectly. He'd send me cheeky jokes, and I'd fire back with my own, and soon enough, we were beginning to plan our first date. He suggested a trendy little bar downtown, the kind of place that serves craft cocktails with names like Smoky Pineapple Dream and Cinnamon Apocalypse. I was nervous, of course. First dates always make me nervous. But I had butterflies in the good way, the kind that make you want to shave your legs even though you're definitely not planning on letting anyone touch them that evening. Or so I thought. The night of the date, I took my time getting ready. I put on my favorite little black dress, the one that hugs my curves in all the right places but doesn't scream, I'm trying too hard. I paired it with some killer heels and a swipe of red lipstick for that effortlessly sexy vibe. But here's where things started to go wrong, although I didn't realize it at the time. About an hour before I left, I decided to grab a quick snack. I hadn't eaten all day because I was too busy obsessing over what to wear and whether or not Jake would think I was funny in person. So I raided my fridge and found some leftover takeout from the night before, specifically a spicy chicken curry. It was delicious, like really delicious. But about 20 minutes later, I started to feel this strange, ominous gurgling in my stomach. Don't overthink it, I told myself. It's just nerves. Spoiler alert, it was not just nerves. I arrived at the bar a few minutes early, which is rare for me, because I'm usually the queen of fashionably late. Jake was already there, sitting at the bar with a drink in hand, and when he turned to smile at me, I swear my knees almost gave out. He was even better looking in person, broad shoulders, strong jawline, the kind of guy who could probably make a flannel shirt look like high fashion. Hey you, he said, standing up to hug me. His cologne smelled amazing, and I could already feel my cheeks flushing. We grabbed a table, and the conversation flowed as easily as the cocktails. Jake was charming, witty, and had this way of looking at me that made me feel like I was the only girl in the room. I was laughing so much my cheeks hurt, and I was already mentally planning our second date. But then, about 30 minutes in, my stomach betrayed me. It started with a small cramp, just a little twinge that I tried to ignore. But then it got worse, and worse, until finally, I knew I had to excuse myself. I'll be right back, I said, standing up so quickly that I almost knocked over my drink. Jake looked a little surprised but smiled and said, "Sure, take your time." I bolted to the bathroom, my heels clacking against the tile floor, and locked myself in a stall. The spicy chicken curry had chosen violence. I'll spare you the graphic details, but let's just say it was a situation. I was in there for what felt like an eternity, frantically Googling things like how to stop stomach cramps immediately, and can you die from embarrassing yourself on a first date? When I finally felt stable enough to return to the table, I took a deep breath, plastered on a smile, and walked back out like nothing had happened. "Everything okay?" Jake asked when I sat down. "Yeah, totally fine." I lied, trying not to look like I had just fought a war in the bathroom. We picked up where we left off, and for a while things were good again. But then, about 10 minutes later, the cramps came back with a vengeance. I need to use the restroom again," I said, trying to sound casual. Jake raised an eyebrow but nodded. "All right, no problem." Round 2 in the bathroom was even worse than the first. At this point, I was sweating, my makeup was smudged, and I was starting to seriously regret every life choice that had led me to this moment. When I finally emerged, Jake was standing near the bar, scrolling through his phone. "Hey, everything okay?" he asked, his tone more concerned this time. Yeah, I'm fine," I said quickly. "Just too many cocktails, I guess." He gave me a small smile, but didn't look convinced. The next hour was a blur of me trying to act normal, while secretly battling the urge to sprint to the bathroom every 5 minutes. I kept excusing myself, and Jake was clearly starting to notice. "Wow, you must really love the bathrooms here," he joked after my 4th trip. I tried to laugh it off, but I could feel my face turning bright red. The final straw came when I was halfway through telling him a story about my dog, and another cramp hit me like a freight train. "Oh my God, I'm so sorry, I have to go again," I blurted out, practically running toward the bathroom without waiting for his response. This time, as I sat in the stall, I seriously considered just staying there forever. Maybe I could text Jake and tell him I'd been abducted by aliens. Or maybe I could fake my own death and start a new life in a different city. But then something even worse happened. There was a knock on the bathroom door. Claire? It was Jake. I wanted to die. Yeah. I croaked, my voice barely audible. Are you okay? You've been in there a while. I'm fine. I squeaked. I'm fixing my makeup. Oh, okay, he said, but I could hear the doubt in his voice. When I finally emerged, Jake was standing outside, looking both concerned and amused. You sure you're okay? He asked, tilting his head. I nodded furiously, trying to act like I wasn't about to collapse. Totally fine. Just, girl stuff. He raised an eyebrow but didn't push it. We sat back down, and I prayed to every god I could think of that my stomach would chill out for the rest of the night. But then Jake leaned in close, his voice dropping to a low, teasing tone. He said, smirking, if you wanted to play hard to get, you didn't have to keep running off. I let out a nervous laugh, trying to ignore the way his proximity made my heart race. Oh, you caught me, I said, forcing a grin. This was all part of my master plan. He chuckled, his eyes sparkling. Well, for what it's worth, I think you're worth the wait. Despite everything, the night ended on a surprisingly good note. We walked out of the bar together, and he offered to call me a cab. You sure you're okay to get home? He asked, his hand brushing against mine. Yeah, I'm fine, I said, my cheeks heating up. He paused, then smiled. All right, but next time, I'm picking the restaurant. Something a little less adventurous. I laughed despite myself. Deal. As I climbed into the cab, I couldn't help but feel a tiny spark of hope. Maybe I hadn't completely ruined things after all. But as soon as I got home, my stomach reminded me who was really in charge. Let's just say I'll never eat spicy chicken curry before a date again. So I was in a relationship with my ex, Alexis, about 5 years ago. I fell for her because of her snarky attitude, intelligence, and kindness. At least, the person she was back then. We clicked instantly, bonding over shared jokes, and I felt like we had something special. But even early on, there were red flags. Alexis lied about small things, often to keep to herself, and avoided asking for help, even when it would have benefited her. For example, she refused my offer to help with social studies, claiming her grandparents would suspect something, even though it was clear she didn't know how Canadian social studies worked. Another red flag was her emotional distance. She would shut me out during hard times, leaving me confused about where I stood. She had insecurities that she occasionally acknowledged, like how being around a bad crowd in the US had negatively influenced her, but she rarely let me help her with anything meaningful. By the end of our relationship, her dishonesty and emotional unavailability had become patterns that left me feeling deeply unsettled. The relationship eventually ended, leaving me confused and without closure. After the breakup, Alexis became distant and vindictive, emotionally shutting me out and making it clear that the person I had loved had changed. After the breakup, I was desperate for closure. A mutual friend, Taylor, claimed she was the one who got us together in the first place, which wasn't true, and told me she could get Alexis and me back together for a price. Desperate to reconcile, I ended up spending over $300 on her promises. For 8 weeks, I'd ask for updates every couple of weeks, but instead of answers, I got excuses, lies, or outright yelling. During this time, I ran into Alexis on Omegle by complete chance. She confirmed personal details only she could know, her name, birthday, and personal things about our relationship, and even told me she loved me. I thought this was the beginning of us reconnecting. She said she wanted to meet me after school, but she never showed up. I was crushed. Later, she denied that the Omegle interaction had ever happened, which left me feeling like I was crazy. Even Jordan, her brother, believed it was her at first, and he tried to mediate by putting us on a Discord call. During that call, I rambled a lot, and it wasn't healthy. It was clear I was spiraling from all the mixed signals and unresolved feelings. After the Omegle encounter, things took a darker turn. Taylor started spreading rumors that I was dangerously obsessed with Alexis, saying I'd go to her house to hurt her. These rumors reached Alexis, and despite knowing the truth, she chose not to disprove them. Her silence allowed the lies to spread throughout the school, leading to devastating consequences. I lost my friends, my reputation, and even became a target. I was physically jumped because of the rumors. Looking back, this was one of the most painful parts of the entire experience. Alexis's inaction felt like a betrayal, compounding the emotional toll of the breakup and the confusion from Omegle. Then, Alexis announced she was moving back to the US. Despite everything, we were somehow still on friendly terms. Before she left, she invited me, Taylor, and my best friend to a water park to spend the day together. At the water park, we all laughed and had fun, but her behavior toward me stood out. While she took everyone else aside for 5 minutes to say her goodbyes, she pulled me aside for an hour. During that time, she was very touchy-feely, constantly finding excuses to make contact with me, whether in the hot tub or by brushing against me. She kept staring at my chest and eyes, flirting with me the entire time. It wasn't just a goodbye, it felt like she still had feelings for me. I left the water park thinking there was a real chance she wanted to get back together. After she left, we kept in touch through the group chat we shared with Taylor and my best friend. Conversations in the group chat were warm and friendly, but whenever I tried to talk to her one-on-one in direct messages, the tone shifted dramatically. She was cold and distant in DMs, and it became clear that the warmth in the group chat was performative. This went on for a while, leaving me emotionally confused and frustrated. Eventually, I realized what was happening. Alexis was keeping me on a hook, tucked away as a plan B. She was ensuring I stayed close enough to her emotionally in case she needed me in the future. When I confronted her about it, she denied everything, but by then it didn't matter. I knew the truth. After I cut contact with Alexis entirely, Jordan started asking if I was talking to her again, thinking he heard my voice in her room. It turned out Alexis was dating a guy who looked and sounded like me, but he didn't have my personality. Their relationship was short-lived, and she dumped him soon after. From there, she bounced between dating various guys and girls, none lasting longer than a month. In June 2024, I noticed Alexis appearing in my Facebook friend suggestions. This started 1 to 2 weeks after her breakup with Ryan, her most recent ex-boyfriend. Initially, Alexis was the only one searching for me, but 3 weeks ago, her best friend Harper also began appearing in my suggestions, likely collaborating with Alexis. 2 days ago, I met Ryan on a Discord server created by Jordan for Minecraft. As we talked, we realized we were eerily similar in personality, and he turned out to be Alexis's most recent ex-boyfriend. Ryan confirmed that Alexis had been keeping me as a plan B all those years ago, something I had always suspected. He also shared that Alexis's manipulative behaviors, dishonesty, and emotional unavailability had intensified over the years. During their 6-month relationship, she became fixated on social media, constantly asking Ryan to keep up her Snapchat streaks instead of focusing on meaningful communication. Ryan also shared that Alexis became angry when he moved on quickly and didn't react the same way I had. It became clear that she thrives on having emotional control over people and was upset when Ryan didn't give her the same power she once had over me. Since then, Ryan and I have bonded over our shared experiences with Alexis. We've used humor to cope, joking about being soulmates, and playfully acting overly affectionate in the Minecraft server to annoy her. Eventually, Alexis saw us talking and left the Discord server entirely. I think it's hilarious that she left after realizing she'd been caught. It feels validating, but at the same time, it reminds me of wounds I've carried for years. These wounds never truly healed. I just got used to them being open. However, with everything that's happened recently, I feel like they're finally starting to close. Even after all this, Alexis still lingers in my thoughts. It's not that I want her back as she is now, but I feel drawn to her in a way I can't fully explain, as if I might have a further purpose in her life. My faith has helped me immensely in processing these feelings. I've prayed for Alexis, for her to find peace and someone who loves her as much as I did, but only if she's willing to change for the better. I've also prayed for clarity and strength, knowing that if she hasn't changed, I wouldn't take her back. I've recently been diagnosed with PTSD, which explains a lot about why I've struggled with these lingering emotions for so long. Honestly, I don't know what it's like not to have it. It all started with a swipe on Tinder. His name was Ryan. There was nothing remarkable about his profile, borderline boring, if I'm being honest. A couple of photos of him hiking, one of him holding a dog, which I later learned wasn't even his, and a bio that read something like, "Just a laid-back guy looking for someone who'll explore the city with him. Family is everything." I didn't have my heart set on anything specific, but after a number of matches who had nothing interesting to offer to a conversation, or who appeared to have been on more than one boys' trip to Las Vegas, Ryan seemed reliable, normal, and normal had sounded pretty good to me. We started chatting. He was courteous, perhaps a bit too much so, but I felt he was simply nervous. He asked about my job, my favorite bands, whether I was more beach or mountains. He seemed sincerely curious to learn more about me, which I found refreshing. What struck me was how many times he mentioned his family. He'd just drop it in conversation, sort of, "Oh, you enjoy cooking? My mom makes the best lasagna, you would love it." Or, "I grew up with 2 sisters, but my mom has always been the most important woman in my life." Sweet, right? At least, that was my first inclination. After messaging for about a week, he asked me out for drinks. I wasn't sure whether I was feeling any sparks, but I thought, why not? He seemed perfectly nice, and I was sick of wasting Friday nights scrolling through Netflix and dozing off on the couch. So I said yes. The bar he chose was adorable, dark, a little fancy, but not too cool. I arrived early and took a booth toward the back. I was so relieved to see that Ryan looked like his pictures when he walked in. Tall, clean-cut, wholesome in a way that made me picture someone you'd take home to meet your parents. He smiled at me, and I smiled back. So far, so good. We went through the niceties. How was your day? How was the drive? You look great, and ordered drinks. He was a little nervous, and that was okay. First dates are awkward. I figured all it needed was a warm-up. Then he started talking, and talking, and talking. Originally, there was nothing out of the ordinary. He told me about his job. He worked in finance, something about spreadsheets and portfolios that I pretended to understand. Next, he started to speak about his family, specifically his mom. "She's my rock," he said, his eyes brightening. "Oh, I really don't know what I would do without her. You're the most incredible woman I've ever known." "That's nice," I said, honestly believing it was sweet. "It sounds like you're pretty close." "Oh, we are," he said, with the conspiratorial lean of someone about to impart a secret. "She's my best friend. I call her every day. Sometimes twice a day. She understands me, you know." I nodded, fighting to keep my smile from cracking. It was a bit intense, but I thought he was just one of those guys who's really family-oriented. Nothing wrong with that. Except he didn't stop. The more he drank, the more he spoke of her. How she'd brought him and his sisters up alone after his father had left. How she'd worked 3 jobs to ensure they were never without. How she continues to send him care packages. Never mind that he's 34 and lives under 10 miles away from her. "It's not only the big stuff," he said, swirling his whiskey and staring into the glass as though it contained the meaning of life. "It's the small things she does too. Like just last week, I was saying I'm considering a new pair of running shoes, and the next day, she's just at my place, with a pair. My exact size. Can you believe that?" "Well, that's considerate," I said, my voice quivering for the first time. I didn't know what to say. Was this normal? Maybe he was simply nervous and was falling back on something benign to make small talk, but I couldn't get past the sense that there was more to it. "Thoughtful," he said again, laughing a little too heartily. "No, thoughtful is when somebody remembers your birthday. This is love. This is what it is like to be spiritually connected to someone on a soul-deep level." He glanced at me, his eyes suddenly serious. "You don't meet somebody like that every day, you know." I nodded, and I tried to change the subject. "So, you said you like hiking? Any good trails around here?" "Oh no, absolutely," he said, waving my effort aside as though it were trifling. "My mom and I are obsessed with hiking. Actually, she's in better shape than I am. Can you believe that? She's 62, and she still smokes me on most trails. It's incredible. She's incredible." By then I could practically feel the bartender's eyes on us from across the room, wondering why I looked as if I were mapping an escape route. I grinned through it, hoping he'd run out of things to say about her soon. But he didn't. For the next hour, he opened up about everything. How she always knew what to say, how she laughed the best laugh, how nobody could make lasagna like she could. He even explained how she'd decorated his apartment, from the color of his bedsheets on up. "She has an eye for that sort of thing," he added proudly. "I mean, she chose my toothbrush holder. My toothbrush holder. Who else would even think of something like that?" I attempted to change the subject again, but he wasn't having it. All roads led back to her. By the time the waiter brought the check, I was ready to pretend there was a family emergency, just so I could get out of there. Then he leaned forward, his face suddenly insistent. "You know," he said in a lowered voice, "I think she'd really like you." "Oh," I said, nervous laughter escaping me. "That's great." "No, I mean it," he said, looking into my eyes. "You have this kind of warmth about you. Like her. It's rare. She's going to love you." He said it in the way that turned my stomach. Not she'd love me. She's going to love me. Like it was inevitable. Like it was already decided. I snatched my coat, and made some excuse about rising early for work, and he insisted on walking me to my car. I didn't have the heart to tell him no, so I let him, even though all of my instincts were yelling at me to run. As we arrived at my car, he stopped and turned to face me. "I really enjoyed myself tonight," he said, smiling in a way that did not touch his eyes. "I think we really clicked." "Yeah," I said, struggling with my keys. "Thanks for the drink." "I'll text you tomorrow," he said, moving closer. "Perhaps we can do dinner next time. My mother prepares this wonderful roast chicken. You'd love it." I stopped in my tracks, my hand resting on the door handle. "Dinner with your mom?" "Of course," he replied, as if it were the most obvious thing in the world. "She has to meet you. I mean, if this is going to lead anywhere, she has to give the green light." I didn't even respond. I murmured the quickest of goodnights, and climbed into my car and locked the doors as soon as they were closed. As I drove out of the parking lot, I looked back in my rearview mirror. Ryan was still watching me drive away. His face was level, inscrutable, but his eyes were pinned to my car, following me until I rounded the corner and vanished. I blocked him as soon as I got home. I'm in the local BDSM community, and I knew this girl from various events and stuff, and asked her if she might want to go out, with the implication that we would be feeling each other out for the prospect of play, as in BDSM play, and hooking up. She was smoking hot, and seemed nice, and we got along well enough at events, so it seemed promising. When I invited her out to eat, I did what I usually do, and invited her to a place I know that's fairly low-key and public. You know, no pressure, quiet enough to chat without being overheard, but public enough that she'll feel safe. This place is also connected to a food court which, I know, not super classy, but that way people have options if they're picky eaters or have a restricted diet. Well, right before we're about to eat, she calls me up and asks if we can eat somewhere else, a Chinese place she likes. I'm caught a bit off guard, but I go with it. We get there, and the entire time she's talking about herself, and it's a very odd talk. She's going on at length about how she wants a sugar daddy, someone who will just give her money and let her do her thing, and she can live a life of luxury without having to work. Yeah, that's not me. But good luck to you on that front, girl. But hey, we're both poly/open, so just because she wants to pursue her dream of some schmuck who will be her golden goose doesn't mean she and I can't still have fun in the meantime, I suppose. Still, the conversation never does get to us. Here, I figured that she and I would be talking about what she's looking for in terms of play. Maybe we could start negotiation, a BDSM term, outlining expectations and rules for play, or at least getting a feel for each other and whether or not we want to proceed. But she's not really asking me anything, and she isn't telling me anything about herself other than this odd kick she's on about sugar daddies. So by the end of the meal, I'm kind of perplexed at the direction things are going, and wondering just when we're going to be talking about, us. And it's here that she asks if we can go to the mall together. Okay, kinda odd. I make a mental note that I will not be spending 1 cent on this girl in the mall. Not because I'm opposed to spending money on a girl, but because she just went on a long rant about wanting a sugar daddy, and I don't want her to get the notion in her head that that's me. We get there, and are joined by another guy who she invited along with us, and that's when I really check out. It's one thing for me to be okay with her seeing other guys while she's seeing me, but it's another thing entirely for her to be inviting them along when we're essentially on our first date. That's just fucking weird. She goes into a clothing store to try on clothes, and me and this other guy are sitting outside the fitting room, and I'm looking for the exit. Only reason I didn't bail immediately was because I'm still going to be seeing this girl regularly at events and didn't want to be rude. As soon as she comes out, I tell her I need to go, and that was the end of that. I'm not upset with that other guy, but I sure as hell hope he had the good sense to get the hell out of there not long after I did. That shit was crazy. This happened about 3 years ago when I was living alone in a small apartment near the university where I worked. I was 31, single, and juggling a full-time job as a research assistant with night classes for my master's. My days were predictable by necessity. Coffee at 7, campus by 8:30, classes until 3, work until 6, then home, leftovers, and sleep. I didn't have time to date, really. I told myself I wasn't looking. But occasionally, when the silence of my apartment felt too loud, I'd scroll through dating apps. Not even to meet anyone, just to remind myself that I still existed in the world outside of work and school. One night, I matched with a man named Daniel. He was 34, worked in tech support, and had a photo of himself holding a black cat with a caption that said, she chose me. His bio was simple: coffee snob, night owl listener. We started chatting that night. He asked thoughtful questions, nothing intrusive. He was funny in a dry way. Sent me a voice memo of him reading a poem after I mentioned I liked spoken word. I found myself smiling at my phone more than I had in months. We moved to texting after a few days. No love bombing, no pressure to meet immediately. He said he respected my busy schedule and didn't want to be another obligation. I liked that. After about 2 weeks, I agreed to a quick coffee date. We met at a cafe 2 blocks from campus. He was taller than I expected, with wire-rimmed glasses and a quiet demeanor. He wore a gray sweater and jeans and didn't try to hug me when we met, which I appreciated. The date was fine. Not electrifying, but warm. We talked about books and how we both hated small talk. He told me his job was mostly remote, fixing systems for clients who never said thank you. I told him about my thesis and how I was convinced it would never be finished. We talked for an hour. Then I said I had to go. He nodded. No guilt tripping. Just, I hope I see you again. I texted him the next day to say thank you. He replied, it was good to sit with someone who doesn't need to fill silence. After that, we fell into a rhythm. We didn't meet again right away, but we texted nearly every day. He seemed to remember things I'd said in passing. My favorite tea, how I liked rainy mornings, the name of my professor who always ran late. At first, I found it sweet. Then it started to feel a little too accurate. One day, I got a message from him just after my class ended. Bet you're walking past the library right now. I paused mid-step. I was walking past the library. I replied, lucky guess. He sent a smiley face. I brushed it off. A few days later, he sent, you always get Thai on Thursdays, don't you? I did. There was a food truck near campus that knew my order by heart, but I'd never told him that. I asked, how'd you know that? He said, you mentioned liking Thai food. I figured Thursday was your long day, so it made sense. It was a decent guess, but something about it stuck with me. Then came the phone call. It was a Thursday night. I was walking home from the library, earbuds in, listening to a podcast. My phone rang. Unknown number. I answered without thinking. Hey, said a voice. You really do walk fast. I stopped walking. Daniel. He laughed softly. I just saw you pass the corner store. Thought I'd say hi. I turned around. There was no one behind me. I didn't say anything. You okay? He asked. Yeah, I said. Just surprised. We hung up soon after. I told him I was tired and needed to get home. My heart was racing the entire walk back. That night, I didn't sleep well. I told myself I was overreacting, that maybe he lived near campus. Maybe it was a coincidence. But something felt wrong. The next day, I asked him casually where he lived. He replied, just outside the city. Why? I said, oh, I thought I saw you near campus the other night. He replied within seconds. Nope. Must have been my doppelganger. I didn't reply. I stopped texting him for a few days. He noticed. Sent a few messages. Nothing pushy. Just, hey, everything okay? Miss talking to you. Hope you're alright. Then finally, if you're not interested anymore, just say so. Don't ghost me like I don't matter. That one made my skin crawl. I blocked him. Deleted the app. Tried to move on. But about a week later, I found a note under my windshield wiper. It was typed. On plain white paper. No name. It said, I liked who you were before you got scared. I looked around the parking lot. No one. I filed a report with campus security. They were sympathetic, but said there wasn't much they could do unless he showed up again or threatened me directly. For a while, nothing happened. Then I started noticing little things. My doormat turned sideways. My mailbox left open. The smell of cigarette smoke outside my window, even though I lived on the second floor and didn't smoke. I bought new locks. A camera doorbell. Moved my car to a different spot every day. I changed my routine. Stopped going to the same coffee shop. Skipped the Thai truck. Took different paths home. The messages didn't come again. But I still felt watched. Still wonder if I was. It's been years now. I don't know who Daniel really was. I don't know if he worked in tech. If his name was even Daniel. If he followed me after our first date, or if he already knew my schedule before we met. I met Marin in the middle of a heat wave. It was June, and the city felt like it was melting. I'd been off dating apps for a while, but boredom and insomnia are a dangerous combination. I opened Hinge at 2 a.m., swiped a few times with no real intention, and matched with her almost instantly. Her first message was, "Let's skip the small talk. Tell me something that would make me delete you immediately." It caught me off guard. I stared at my screen, then typed back, "I once pretended to like jazz for an entire relationship." She replied, "Understandable. Jazz is a scam." We messaged for hours that night. She had this biting humor, the kind that made you feel like you were being examined and entertained at the same time. Her photos were mostly candids, laughing with friends, sitting on a curb eating ice cream, one mirror selfie in a bathroom with horrible lighting. She wasn't conventionally beautiful, but she had presence. You could feel it even through a screen. We met in person 3 days later. A bar with terrible air conditioning and cheap beer, the kind of place where the music was loud enough to fill silences, but not so loud you had to shout. She showed up in a black tank top and jeans, hair tied up in a messy knot, a single silver ring on her middle finger. "I don't do dating," she said within the first 5 minutes. "This is an experiment." I asked, "On what?" "On whether intimacy is possible without performance." I laughed. She didn't. We kept seeing each other. Not regularly, not predictably. She'd text at odd hours. "Come over. I made soup. Want to walk with me until my feet hurt? Are you ever afraid you're the villain in someone's story?" Sometimes we'd talk for hours. Other times, she'd fall asleep mid-movie, curled into a question mark on the couch. She told me about growing up in a house where no one ever said sorry. About moving to the city alone at 19. About the time she shaved her head because someone told her she was prettier with long hair. I liked her. A lot. But I never knew where I stood. Then came the night she asked for a toothbrush. It was a Sunday. She'd come over after a rough day, some fight with her landlord, something about mold and broken promises. We drank wine on my balcony and shared a frozen pizza. She seemed tired, not in a sleepy way, but like her bones were worn down. At one point, she stood up and said, "I don't want to go home." "Then don't," I said without thinking. She looked at me, then nodded. "Do you have a spare toothbrush?" It was such a simple question. But I froze. Because it felt like a shift. Like something had moved from casual to something else. I said, "I think I do. Hold on." I found one in the cabinet, still in the wrapper, from a dentist's visit months ago. I handed it to her, and she smiled, but not all the way. "Thanks," she said. "That's sweet of you." She brushed her teeth, washed her face, and climbed into bed beside me like she'd always belonged there. We didn't have sex that night. She just curled into my side and whispered, "I don't sleep well. Don't be offended if I leave before sunrise." But she stayed. When I woke up, she was staring at the ceiling with a blank expression. "You ever feel like your body's just a costume?" she asked. Before I could answer, she sat up and said she had to go. She didn't message me for a week. I didn't want to push. I figured she needed space. Then late one night, I got a text. "You made me feel too safe." "That's dangerous." I replied, "I don't know what that means." She didn't answer. Another week passed. Then I saw her. Not in person, on someone else's Instagram story. A blurry shot from a party, her in the background, laughing with someone I didn't recognize. She looked happy, or at least functional. I didn't reach out. Then, out of nowhere, she showed up at my place. It was a Wednesday. I was in sweatpants, eating cereal for dinner, and she knocked on my door like nothing had happened. I opened it, startled. "Hey," she said. "I was in the neighborhood." I let her in. She wandered around like she was trying to remember something. Then she asked, "Did you throw out my toothbrush?" I blinked. "I didn't know you were coming back." She nodded slowly, then walked into the bathroom. When she came out, she held the toothbrush. "I left this here," she said. "That means something." I didn't know what to say. She sat on the couch, toothbrush still in hand, and asked, "Do you feel close to me?" I said, "Sometimes." She looked disappointed. Then she said, "I think I've been using you to see if I'm capable of being known." I didn't know whether to feel flattered or used. She stayed that night, and the night after. Then she vanished again. No message. No warning. This time, I didn't reach out. 2 weeks later, I got a package in the mail. No return address. Inside, a small tin box. Inside the box, the toothbrush. Wrapped in a napkin from the pizza place we'd gone to on our first night. And a note, handwritten in loopy cursive. "This means something. But I don't know what. Thank you for being a mirror. I'm sorry if that's all I was." That was the last I heard from her. I don't know what she wanted from me in the end. Maybe nothing. Maybe just somewhere to test the edges of herself. I still have the tin box. I don't know why I kept it. I met Eli on Hinge. He was 36, a software developer who, according to his profile, loved road trips, cooking, and deep conversations over strong coffee. He had a quiet smile in his photos, like he was always holding back laughter, and a beard that was just a little uneven. He looked normal. Not polished, not trying too hard. That was refreshing. We started chatting on a Tuesday afternoon. By Saturday, we were texting nonstop. He was good at keeping the conversation going without being too much. Asked about my favorite books, and then actually read one of them. Called me quick-witted when I made a dumb joke about my cat knocking over my houseplants. Our first date was at a brewery downtown. He was a little taller than I expected, smelled like cedar and clean laundry, and had a way of listening that made me feel like I was the only person in the room. We shared 2 flights and a plate of pretzel bites. When I told him I was trying to rebuild trust after a toxic relationship, he didn't flinch. Just nodded and said, "You don't owe anyone your softness until they earn it." We ended the night with a hug. He didn't try to push anything. Texted me when he got home. Tonight was easy in the best way. We saw each other again the next week. Then again the week after that. Always at public places, coffee shops, bookstores, a couple of casual dinners. No pressure, no red flags. He never came on too strong. I appreciated that. After about a month of dating, he invited me over for dinner. "I make a mean chicken cacciatore," he said, "and I promise I won't overcook the pasta." I hesitated. I hadn't been to his place yet, but we'd spent hours together. He'd never made me uncomfortable. And I liked him. Liked how calm I felt around him. So I said yes. He lived in a quiet neighborhood about 25 minutes from mine. Lots of trees, houses with wide driveways and wind chimes. His place was a small ranch-style house with a porch swing and mismatched flower pots. He greeted me at the door with a dish towel slung over his shoulder and a little bit of flour on his shirt. "You're early," he said, grinning. "I haven't finished burning dinner yet." I laughed. Followed him inside. The house smelled like garlic and red wine. The kitchen was clean but lived in, wooden cutting board, spice jars lined up on a shelf, a fridge covered in postcards and grocery lists. He poured me a glass of red and told me to make myself at home. While he finished cooking, I wandered toward the living room. There were books stacked on the coffee table, a cat curled up on the couch, her name was Olive, and a record player in the corner. Everything felt normal, comfortable. When dinner was ready, we sat at the small table by the window. The chicken was perfect, the pasta slightly overcooked, and we both laughed when I pointed it out. We talked for 2 hours, maybe more. He asked questions about my family, my childhood, my writing. Told me about growing up in Vermont, and how he once got stuck in a snowstorm for 5 hours with only a granola bar and a dying phone. At one point, I asked where his bathroom was. "Down the hall, second door on the left," he said. "Don't open the door at the end. That's my basement. It sticks and is a pain to close again." I nodded and went to the bathroom. When I came out, I paused. The basement door wasn't completely shut. It was slightly ajar, enough to show the top of a wooden staircase. I don't know why I looked. Curiosity, I guess. I wasn't snooping. I just glanced. There was a light on down there. I could see the concrete floor, part of a metal shelving unit, and something white near the bottom step. I leaned slightly to get a better view. It was a folding table. On it, a laptop, a pair of gloves, and what looked like a wig. I froze. Not because of what I saw, exactly. It wasn't that any one item was horrifying. But something about the combination, the secrecy, the fact that he'd told me not to look, it all made my skin crawl. I stepped back and quietly pulled the door closed. When I returned to the kitchen, Eli was rinsing dishes. "Thanks for dinner," I said, keeping my voice steady. He smiled. "You okay?" "Yeah, just tired. I think I'm gonna head out." He offered to walk me to the car, but I declined. "Don't worry," I said. "I park like a professional escape artist." He laughed, and I forced a smile. But inside, I was buzzing. I didn't sleep well that night. Kept replaying the image of that basement. The table. The gloves. The wig. I told myself I was being dramatic. Maybe the gloves were for gardening. Maybe the wig was for a Halloween costume. Maybe the laptop was where he did freelance work. But I couldn't shake the feeling. The next day I Googled him. His name, the one he gave me, brought up a LinkedIn profile. Sparse, but it matched what he'd told me, software developer, Vermont native. I searched deeper. Found an old college newspaper article from 2007. He was listed as part of a campus coding competition. Same name, same major. But the photo wasn't him. Different guy entirely. I went back to his Facebook. His profile was private, barely used. A few pictures, none recent. Not many friends. Something felt off. I reverse image searched one of his profile pictures. It showed up on a stock photo site, under the tag, friendly man in casual clothes. I sat there, stomach sinking, heart racing. The man I'd been dating wasn't Eli. Or at least, not the Eli he pretended to be. I called the number he'd been using. It rang once, then went to voicemail. His voice was still there, calm, familiar. I didn't leave a message. I reported the profile on Hinge. Blocked the number. Sent the information I had, screenshots, messages, the stock photo link, to a friend who worked in cybersecurity. She called me that night. "I don't want to freak you out," she said, "but this guy's digital footprint is razor thin. Like, intentionally built to look real but vanish when you push." I filed a police report. Told them everything. They took it seriously, to their credit. Asked for all the messages, his address, the night I visited. They went to the house. It was empty. Furniture gone. Appliances too. The landlord said the tenant had moved out that morning. Paid cash for the last month. Left no forwarding address. The man I'd known as Eli had disappeared. I haven't heard from him since. I didn't expect to be dating again at 42. After my divorce, I told myself I'd take a year to just focus on me and my daughter, Kayla. She was 14 at the time, old enough to understand that her parents were better off apart, but still young enough that I worried about how everything would affect her. The first year post-divorce was about survival. Paying bills, rebuilding our routines, learning how to be alone without feeling lonely. Then slowly I started thinking about companionship again. I wasn't looking for anything serious. I just missed conversation. Missed being seen. Kayla was the one who finally nudged me. "Mom," she said one night over spaghetti, "you should go on a date." I raised an eyebrow. "That's a weird thing to hear from your teenager." She shrugged. "You're allowed to be happy." So I downloaded a dating app. I wasn't expecting much. Maybe a few awkward coffee dates, a couple of ghostings, and best case, someone who didn't make me want to fake an emergency halfway through dinner. That's when I matched with Greg. He was 45, worked in environmental consulting, and lived about 20 minutes away. His profile had pictures of him hiking, smiling with a golden retriever, and grilling something on a patio. He wrote that he was family-oriented, emotionally available, and ready for the next chapter. It felt safe. That was my first impression. He didn't have that overly polished, too smooth vibe that some men on the app had. He seemed normal, grounded. We messaged for a few days before talking on the phone. He had a deep, reassuring voice. Asked thoughtful questions. Told me he'd been divorced for a few years, no kids. Said he liked that I was honest about having a teenage daughter. "I admire single moms," he said. "It's the hardest job in the world." Our first date was coffee on a Sunday afternoon. He was warm and easy to talk to. No red flags. No weird comments. Just good conversation and a shared slice of lemon cake. We saw each other again the following weekend. Then again 2 days after that. He didn't rush anything. Didn't push for more than I was comfortable giving. He texted good morning. Asked how my meetings went. Sent me a photo of his dog, Ranger, curled up under a blanket. After about a month, I mentioned that my church was holding its annual spring potluck. I wasn't inviting him, not directly. I was just talking about it in passing. But he lit up. "That sounds lovely," he said. "I haven't been to a church dinner in years." I hesitated. "It's mostly families. Not really a dating scene." He smiled. "I'm not going to cruise for dates. I just think it'd be nice to meet the people important to you. Unless you'd rather I didn't come." I didn't know how to say no without sounding rude. And honestly, it didn't seem like a big deal. It was a public event. Plenty of people would be around. So I said sure. He offered to bring a dish, homemade meatballs, he said, from his grandmother's recipe. The night of the potluck, he showed up early. Wore a blue button-down and khakis. Brought a tray of meatballs, a container of extra sauce, and a bouquet of tulips for me. Everyone loved him. He was charming without being showy. Asked people about their kids. Complimented the food. Even helped fold chairs when the event was winding down. At one point, I saw him talking to Kayla and 2 of her friends. They were sitting on the edge of the stage in the fellowship hall, laughing at something he'd said. It made me smile. He didn't seem like the type to treat teenage girls as invisible, which I appreciated. Later, as we were packing up, Kayla was quieter than usual. "You okay?" I asked on the drive home. She nodded. Yeah, just tired. She didn't bring him up. I didn't push. But something in her tone felt off. I figured maybe she was still adjusting. It was only the second time she'd been around him. 2 nights later, I found her sitting on her bed, scrolling through something on her phone, her face tight. "Hey," I said. "Want to talk?" She hesitated. Then she said, "Greg's weird." My stomach dropped. I sat on the edge of her bed. "What do you mean?" She looked at me, then down at her hands. During the potluck, he asked me if I had a boyfriend. And when I said no, he said, "Good. You're too pretty for boys your age. They wouldn't know what to do with you." I stared at her. Then she added, "He also asked if I had Instagram." I said no. He said that was a shame, that he'd love to see the kinds of pictures I post. I felt my chest tighten. "Why didn't you tell me earlier?" I asked gently. She shrugged. "I don't know. I thought maybe I imagined it. But I kept thinking about it, and it just felt gross." I hugged her, told her she did the right thing by telling me, that she didn't imagine it, that her instincts were good. After she went to bed, I sat in the kitchen, staring at the wall. I didn't want to believe it, but I did, because I remembered the way he'd looked at her, just a beat too long. The way he'd asked about her school, her interests, her schedule, all under the guise of polite adult conversation. I texted him the next morning. "We need to talk." He didn't reply. I called. Straight to voicemail. By lunchtime, his number was disconnected. His dating profile was gone. His LinkedIn, Facebook, even the photos he'd sent me, all disappeared. I called the number listed on the environmental consulting firm he claimed to work for. They'd never heard of him. I drove by the address he gave me the first time we met. It was a house, but it was vacant. For sale. A real estate sign in the yard. The man I'd been seeing didn't exist. Or at least, not in the way I thought. I filed a report. Told the church leadership. Told the other parents whose kids had spoken to him. Everyone was horrified. A few people asked if I'd checked him out before bringing him around. I didn't have the energy to defend myself. Because the truth is, I had. I'd Googled him. Searched his number. Looked up the company. Nothing screamed fake. And yet, I don't know what his real name was. Or what he wanted. Or why he vanished so quickly. But I know this. He was interested in my daughter. Not in me. And he used me to get close to her. It's been almost a year since that night. Kayla's doing okay. We've talked about it more than once. She says it feels like a bad dream now, blurry around the edges. But she still doesn't like it when I mention dating. Says she wants me to wait a little longer. I'd been out of a long-term relationship for about a year, and I was cautiously trying to date again. Not looking for anything serious, but open to it if the right person came along. I was mostly matching with people close to my age, late 20s, early 30s, because I didn't feel like dealing with the different expectations that often come with big age gaps. That's when I matched with Jess. Her profile said she was 26. She had a short bio, books, coffee, sapphic chaos. Her photos were casual, one at a bookstore, one with a cat curled up on her lap, one mirror selfie wearing a band tee I actually recognized, which is rare. She messaged first, "You look like the type of person who alphabetizes their spice rack." I laughed. She wasn't wrong. Our conversation was easy from the start. She was clever, sarcastic, and just a little weird in a way that felt familiar. We talked about our favorite childhood books, bad tattoos, and how neither of us understood the appeal of brunch, but somehow kept ending up at it anyway. We texted for a week before meeting in person. She lived about 30 minutes away, in a smaller town just outside of the city. Said she worked part-time at a library and was finishing up a degree in graphic design. We met at a cafe halfway between us. She was a little shorter than I expected, with dyed blue hair, chipped nail polish, and a nervous energy that was oddly charming. She didn't make a lot of eye contact, but when she did, it felt intense. We sat outside and talked for 2 hours. She told me about a zine she was working on, and I told her about the worst job I ever had, which involved dressing as a mascot for a local car dealership. She laughed so hard she snorted, then apologized for it. That night, she messaged me, "I like you." I don't usually say that this fast, but I do. I smiled at the screen for longer than I should admit. We saw each other again the next week. Then again the week after that. Things stayed casual, but there was a growing closeness. We were texting constantly, sharing playlists, talking about things that felt heavier, past relationships, family stuff, fears we didn't usually say out loud. One night, we were lying on my couch watching a terrible horror movie, and she suddenly asked, Would it be weird if I said I wanted to keep seeing you, like, seriously? I turned to her. No, that wouldn't be weird. She smiled. Good. I was worried you might think I'm too young or something. That made me pause. You're 26, I said. That's not too young. She went quiet for a second. Then she said, Okay, so there's something I have to tell you. I felt my stomach tighten. I'm not 26, she said. I'm 20. I stared at her. She rushed on. I know that's a lot, and I know I should have told you sooner. But I liked you, and I didn't think you'd even talk to me if I put my real age. I don't usually lie about this, but you seemed safe. You didn't message me anything creepy. You seemed kind. I didn't know what to say. Because 20 isn't illegal. It's not like she was 16 or something. But it felt off. Like I'd been tricked into something I didn't agree to. I asked her why she lied. She said, People don't take me seriously when they know my real age. I hate how fast people dismiss you when you're young. Like you can't be smart or mature or interesting unless you've hit 25. I understood that. On some level, I really did. But still. You lied to me, I said. That matters. She looked down. I know. I'm sorry. We sat in silence for a long time after that. Eventually, she left. I didn't say whether I'd see her again. The next day, I got a long message from her. Apologizing again. Saying she understood if I didn't want to talk anymore. But also saying she didn't regret matching with me. That she felt something real, even if it started from something fake. I didn't reply. I needed space. Time to think. To figure out how I felt. A few days passed. Then I started getting messages from new Tinder profiles. Different names. Different photos. But the same writing style. The same jokes. One profile said, Some people ghost because they're cowards. Another, Still thinking about those playlists. Then another that just said, You never gave me a chance. I unmatched all of them. I blocked the numbers when they started texting me. But they kept showing up. Each time slightly different. Slightly more invasive. One night, I got a message from a new number that just said, I saw you at the bookstore yesterday. Why didn't you say hi? I had been at the bookstore. I hadn't mentioned it to anyone. I checked the windows. Locked the door again. Made sure the curtains were closed. The next day, I got a friend request on Instagram from an account named Your Second Chance. No profile picture. No posts. The bio said, You made a mistake. I didn't respond. I just blocked again. But the thing is, once that line gets crossed, you start questioning everything. Every notification. Every anonymous like. Every glance over your shoulder in public. I stopped using Tinder. Deleted my account entirely. I started posting less. I kept my location off. I changed my phone number. It didn't stop right away. The last message I got was a voice memo from a number I didn't recognize. I didn't open it. I just deleted it. Blocked the sender. Turned off my phone and sat there in the dark for a long time. It's been over a year now. I haven't seen her since. Haven't heard anything. I don't know if she finally moved on or just found someone else to fixate on. I don't even know where to start. My hands are shaking as I type this, and I'm not sure if I even want to post it, but I just need to get it out. I feel like I'm losing my mind, like the last few years of my life weren't even real. I, 32 female, have been married to my husband Jake, 35 male, for 5 years, together for 7. We met at a bar of all places. He wasn't even my type at first, but he was so charming, so easy to talk to. He made me laugh, made me feel safe. It wasn't a crazy love story or anything, but it felt real. He was my best friend, my partner. Or at least, I thought he was. I don't even know how to explain the feeling I've had the past few months. Like, something was off, but I couldn't put my finger on it. We still got along, still had date nights, still functioned like a normal couple. But it was like he wasn't there anymore. Emotionally, physically. Sex became rare, and when it did happen, it felt robotic. Like he was just going through the motions. I asked him about it a few times. He'd always brush it off. Just stress, babe. Work is killing me. I'm just getting older, you know? And I wanted to believe him. I did believe him. Until last Friday. He told me he was going out with some co-workers for drinks. I didn't think anything of it at first, but as the night went on, something just nagged at me. He wasn't texting me like he usually did when he was out. No updates, no on my way home soon text. Just radio silence. And I don't know why, but for the first time in my entire marriage, I did something I had never done before. I opened the Find My iPhone app. I stared at the screen for a long time. He wasn't at a bar. He wasn't anywhere near the part of town he said he'd be in. His location showed a small hotel downtown. My heart started pounding. I wanted to be rational. Maybe he had a work event at the hotel. Maybe someone got too drunk and he was helping them. But deep down I knew. I just knew. I don't even remember driving there. I just remember standing in the lobby, feeling like I was outside of my own body. I walked up to the front desk and God, I don't even know how I got the words out. I asked if my husband checked and I showed here a picture. The woman behind the desk gave me this look, like she knew exactly what was going on. And then she just sighed and said, "Room 214. I swear I almost threw up right there. I took the stairs because I couldn't stand the thought of being trapped in an elevator, alone with my thoughts. Every step felt heavier than the last. My whole body was screaming at me to turn around, to just leave and pretend I never saw that location. But I couldn't. When I got to the door, I knocked. Nothing. Then I heard movement. And then his voice, one moment. The door cracked open, just a sliver, and there he was. Shirtless. Eyes wide. Panicked. And that's when I pushed the door open. There he was. And there was Aaron. His best friend. The one he always said was like a brother to him. The one he spent so much time with. The one who, I suddenly realized, had probably been in his life in a way I never even knew. Aaron was in bed, scrambling for the sheets, looking just as horrified as Jake did. And I froze. I wish I could say I screamed at him, that I threw things, that I went full-on crazy wife. But I didn't. I just stood there, staring, feeling the entire foundation of my life collapse under me. Jake said my name, like he was trying to explain. And I just laughed. Not because it was funny. It wasn't. It was the most painful thing I've ever felt in my life. But my body didn't know what else to do. I laughed so hard I thought I was going to choke on it. I had spent some time thinking I was the problem. Thinking I wasn't sexy enough, fun enough for him. And the whole time, I was just his beard. I was his shield, his cover, his excuse to live a lie. When I finally stopped laughing, I looked him right in the eye and said, "You never loved me. You loved what I did for you." He didn't deny it. I turned around and walked out, ignoring his pathetic "wait, please," like I owed him anything. Now I'm sitting here in my apartment, surrounded by pictures of a life that was never real. I feel like I've lost everything. Not just my husband, but the truth. Because what the hell was my marriage if not a complete and total lie? I don't know where to go from here. I don't even know who I am without him. I just know I can't be this woman anymore. Well, it wasn't so much that she wanted to do what I now know as the daddy/little girl game, and that she actually literally identified as a 4-year-old, age play I think they call it, or that she was clearly still obsessed with her ex, or that after all this coming out on the second date, she proceeded to divulge that she had been attacked many, many times. In graphic detail, it was so excessive that there's no way it was true, but when someone tells you that kind of thing you want to give them the benefit of the doubt. We ended up back at some relative's house, and just as I was about to bounce I realized she was already really drunk, despite only having a couple of drinks. She was a pretty tiny girl though. And then she began to talk about Sweeney Todd, the demon barber of Fleet Street. No, it wasn't any of the previously mentioned things. It was Sweeney Todd that led me through one of the most bizarre experiences of my life. Apparently it was the greatest play ever penned, blubbered out in a grand drunken dissertation that probably couldn't be rivaled by even the greatest booze artists of our time. I admit, I was captivated in some morbid way. I stayed and sipped on my drinks as she went further down a rabbit hole that, as it existed within her, had no bottom. It was like watching someone who wrote their thesis on the thing, but was promptly failed vent about the injustice of it all. And I imagined she would have failed because she handed the thesis into a technical writing class, while drunk. This is how discordant and obtuse it all was. By my guess, the only type of person still willing to listen to what was becoming more obviously a compulsion evolved far beyond impulse were strangers. The other people present had expressions like it was happening for the 1,000th time, and they were powerless to stop it. And I was powerless to look away. Such a passionate, fervent, elaborate, and frenzied car crash. Then she started singing. And did she ever sing? She fell over regularly, and her words were so slurred, and her physical movement so slothful and blurred, that I knew I was in for a real show. She did the whole play. From beginning to end, every part, each character with their own voice. She was mostly naked by the time it ended. I sat there and cheered her on, and tried to stop her drinking, and stoke the fire pit in the backyard of this stranger's house. She didn't miss a beat, a line, a gesture. Even when I went to the can. The neighbors hollered and the dogs barked, and I was beginning to wonder if I wasn't dreaming or something. I had never before nor since seen someone so in love with a piece of art as this crazy little French girl was. I was almost envious that I didn't feel that way about something. When she finally wrapped up and I told her to take a bow, she toppled over doing just that and proceeded to crawl over to me in my chair and try to initiate a blowjob. I laughed, picked her up, carried her in the house, and dumped her on the couch. Didn't even bother saying goodbye. I knew she wouldn't remember it anyway. I walked back to my truck laughing and contemplating the sheer absurdity of humanity, knowing I'd never see anything like that again. Wherever you are, Michaela, I hope you're doing okay. I hope you found your daddy, and life's a little smoother for you. But it probably isn't. Blessed be the mad ones. I know it probably sounds bad, but hear me out. In my head it's a long story, but I'm going to try to keep it as short as possible. Sorry if it sounds choppy. Also, English isn't my first language. Last year I had to move in with my parents because I was having a hard time finding a new place to rent after a really bad breakup. My parents and I don't get along great for a lot of reasons, and it made everything a lot worse. So to get out of that, I eventually decided to apply for some jobs in other places. At the time I really didn't want to, since I'd lived in that city my whole life, and I liked my job, but I just couldn't stay with my parents anymore. I found a job pretty quickly because this hotel was reopening after changing owners, and they weren't finding staff easily, so I ended up moving here in October. In the beginning I wasn't socializing much because it's really hard to find friends here when everyone already knows everyone. My country and region are doing well, no confirmed cases in town yet, but it definitely didn't help with making friends. I've also been pretty busy because I decided to buy a house. It just kinda happened because my boss knew the previous owners, and it was super cheap since it needed a lot of work, but it definitely made this move feel very permanent. Then in May this guy, let's call him Eric, and I got stuck in the social distancing queue outside the pharmacy together and started talking. I told him I was new, and he invited me to a barbecue with his friends. NGL, I'm not great with new people, but they made me feel welcome and were all very nice. After that we just kept hanging out, mostly me and Eric, which I thought was because he was quite careful during these times and only saw his big group of friends outside. Plus we were the only two who weren't in a relationship or had kids, so it made sense in my head that we were alone a lot. I'd cook him dinner/lunch, I'm a chef, and he'd show me great hiking places and help out a lot with the renovations on the house. I also started telling him about the breakup and stuff, and even though I feel like I've moved on, it was still nice that he was so understanding. Like, I always thought it sounded so cheesy when people talked about knowing like a week into a friendship or relationship that it was going to be different, but that's the only way I can describe what it's felt like. I promise now that I'm writing it down it's so obvious, but I honestly didn't think much of it since I've never dated a guy before. Then like 2 to 3 weeks ago he called and asked if I wanted to have dinner on my next night off, and also said just you and me. He seemed kinda weird and formal, but I assumed it was something else going on, and just said yes. To which he responded, "It's a date then," and I assumed he meant that as a joke-y line because I have friends who have in the past. He picked this restaurant in another town that was relatively fancy that I'd never been to, and I drove him home afterwards, and he told me good night and that he'd had a great time. Usually we're not that formal with each other, but we weren't really acting that different during dinner, so again I didn't think much of it. Then over the next week or so he started sending hearts and texts and would call me some pet names here and there, which is the first thing that stood out to me a lot. Then earlier this week he grabbed my hand while we were out during his lunch break, and that's when it finally clicked. It really caught me by surprise, and I didn't know how to react, so I tried to play it cool and go along with it. Then yesterday he texted and asked if we were still on for our movie night on Sunday, and I just said, "Yeah, of course," and I'm starting to panic a bit. I grew up pretty conservative, and I guess didn't question my sexuality a lot, even when I got to university, and a lot of other people were. I've always been awkward when it comes to that stuff, and I never really made the first move with any of the girls I've dated. But I've been thinking about it for the last few days, and I've realized I really like him, and all the stuff he's done never made me uncomfortable. Quite the opposite, actually. He's cute, definitely what I would have said is my type, but like a guy version, and it feels different than any friendship I've ever had. Like again, looking back, I definitely haven't been acting super platonic with him, and we've gotten close really fast. And if I'm being honest, if he'd been a girl, I also would have assumed that's where this was going. I guess my issue is, should I tell him next time I see him that I didn't realize we were dating? Should I wait? Does he need to know? I don't want him to feel embarrassed that he assumed or think that I'm using him to figure myself out, but I also don't want to lie. I genuinely want to see where this goes since he makes me really happy. To summarize, I moved to a new town after a bad breakup with a girl, met this guy, thought we were just instantly good friends. I didn't realize he was actually asking me out, then realized it when he held my hand when we went for lunch. I thought about it, and I really like him a lot. Should I tell him I didn't realize we were dating, and that he's the first guy I've ever dated, or should I wait a bit? Not tell him at all. Here's what happened afterwards. So we had our dinner/movie night yesterday, and I was very nervous. Mostly because I was scared that how new it was to me was going to be a deal breaker. But Eric came over, and I think he instantly realized I was acting weird. He didn't say anything while he was helping me cook, but then when we sat down to eat, he almost immediately asked what was up. So I basically said something like, I really like you, and I want to see where this goes, but I want you to know it's very new to me, and I'm not sure you're cool with that. And he asked what exactly was new to me, and I said I'd only dated girls before. Which then led to a conversation where I couldn't avoid telling him that I didn't realize we were dating until that lunch. He actually got really quiet for a few seconds after that, and I was scared he was upset, but then he just laughed. Basically, he thought I'd been flirting with him for quite some time. Looking back, I probably was, just not intentionally. And all of his friends had been saying like, he seems so into you, it's really obvious, he's probably just too shy to make the first move. He even mentioned some other stuff we or I had done that I gotta admit definitely doesn't sound platonic when he retells it. So I can see why they thought that, and ultimately they were right, I guess. And during that lunch he'd apparently thought I was reaching to grab his hand, so he reached out too. Otherwise he probably wouldn't have done it, because he said he's never been good at making the first move physically. He said when he asked me to dinner, that was a huge deal, and his friends had tried to hype him up for a while, and that's probably why I didn't realize that he was asking me out since he was super nervous. Anyway, we ended up talking a lot after dinner. He didn't come out publicly, aside from a few close friends, until a year or so ago either, so he definitely understood that I don't have a lot of experience. He hasn't had a lot of relationships in general, at least not any proper and public ones, since he hadn't come out, and it's a pretty conservative area, so there aren't a lot of guys who are out of the closet here. He actually admitted that he'd even been nervous to talk to me that first time we met since I looked kind of lumberjack. Why? His words, not mine, though the day we met I think I hadn't shaved in a while, so I don't doubt it. And he also knows rumors travel fast here, especially when someone doesn't really fit in, so I guess he was worried that I'd fit the small-town conservative type or have heard all the gossip. The whole, it's a date thing for example would never happen between two guys who are just friends here. I've definitely noticed the culture, and it's something we talked about too since being out here isn't always easy, so we might try to keep it low-key at first and mostly tell his friends and some of mine. I could probably ramble on about him and what we talked about for a long time, but to keep it short, it was a really nice talk and we want to take it slow, but we also realize we've basically been half dating since May, so it felt weird not to make it official. So I decided to punish myself this evening and reinstall Tinder for the 80th time. The definition of insanity is doing the same thing over again and expecting a different result, and tonight I have perpetuated this notion. Maybe I subconsciously enjoy the pain. This isn't a rant about not achieving a desired result on Tinder. I have no real end goal. I'm not thirsty. I really couldn't give a fuck about the outcome of my Tinder endeavors. This is a rant about some of the shit people say in their bios. I have questions. Here are some of the bios I've come across. Mentally ill with daddy issues and a drinking problem. Dating me is like taking too much acid. Mentally unstable and obsessed with red flags. Who is this for? Who reads this and thinks, that's her. That's someone I want to penetrate. Nothing could possibly go wrong. Have mental health problems, hell, have 2 or 3. Lord knows I'm no spring chicken. Have baggage, have trauma from past experiences. Nothing inherently wrong with any of this. I just cannot fathom why you would advertise this shit as some kind of enticing personality quirk. Imagine a man saying this. Wouldn't you run for the hills? Imagine the people that they match with. What kind of man reads a bio like that and thinks this could work to my advantage? Seek help. You are fishing for sharks with your bare hands, and your friends will have to deal with the inevitable bullshit that comes out of this. Do you want someone to save you? Because I think the probability is you have a 3-month relationship that starts of extremely passionate. You say I love you after you spend 14 straight days together after your first date, and it's full of wild, low-key terrifying sex and impulsive behavior, And it ends horrifically when you realize you're both total fucked up emotional vampires. And then what? It's a tale as old as time. You don't need Tinder, you need therapy. Dating you is like taking too much acid? You need a warehouse full of able bodies to unpack a statement like that. I would rather die alone. Then you've got, I can leg press you. I can probably scull a beer faster than you. I'm funnier than you. I'd beat you in tennis. Is there a market for this? Are there men out there who are turned on by the thought of being leg pressed by their girlfriend? Is everything going to be a competition? It gives off intense, I'm always right vibes. If you know, you wish you didn't know. Are there men out there who read a bio like, I'm better than you at stuff, and think that's so hot, talk down to me more, insult me mummy, disrespect my intelligence belittle me. What do you get out of that? And then you've got variations of, I won't message first, you need to be X and Y and own X item, and have X haircut etc., etc., etc. Which essentially says, I'm hard work, I am an asset that you need to work for, you will constantly be falling over yourself to impress me. Well, I'm sold. That sounds like a valuable way to spend a couple of years of my early 20s. I need to be constantly reminded of your constantly appreciating value. You could have anyone you want, but you chose me, and I should be grateful. Visit a slum or something. Kendrick was onto something when he said, be humble. I find it disheartening that this kind of arrogance and these unwavering, unrealistic standards are applauded as self-love. They just know what they want, right? Sure. Let's give people exactly what they want all the time. That'll end well for society. You deserve this. Less confusing, but more excruciatingly boring, are the classic. Avocado is overrated, haha. Coffee red heart. My controversial opinion is, insert possibly the least interesting thought anyone has ever had in the history of consciousness. Like, I'm not as emotional about this one. It's just so unoriginal, so uncreative, and it's so out of place when it's slapped underneath a pair of bare-ass cheeks. You're going for wholesome when I can just about see your literal, actual asshole. You're telling me that you enjoy eating food and drinking coffee. Do you also enjoy breathing? Sleeping in bed is great too. Walking is something you do for sure sometimes. Maybe even watching TV when you're feeling wild. Also, I absolutely love that you can just take a picture of the place you shit out of, and it just works. You don't get lost in someone's eyes anymore. You get lost in their ass cheeks, the depth of the crack, the poetry of underwear. Elegant, classy, mysterious. Tinder Bums, the movie. Finally, you've got the way too muchers. Don't be boring. Let's talk about intelligent things. Biochemistry, Jordan Peterson, chemicals, neuroscience. It went on like that for what felt like a lifetime. This was an actual bio I read. The depths of the darkness can only be illuminated by two hearts coming together to create a light. This also went on for half a screen. Honestly, these kinds of people are probably actually interesting and have something to offer to the right person. I just think you're trying too hard to communicate who you are, to convey depth. Why? Who is this for? Okay, we get it. You are profound and your blog is worth a read. Do I want to meet up with you and have my taste in wine critiqued while we unironically talk about chemicals? That sounds really hot. Let me get back to you on that one. There are so many funny bios out there, don't get me wrong, so many awesome chats to be had. It's definitely a roller coaster. The best bios I see are ones where you can tell that they genuinely don't really give a fuck instead of just pretending they don't give a fuck to cover up the fact that they give more of a fuck than they'll ever be able to admit to themselves. It's really not subtle. I swiped through Tinder and just, oh, honey, love yourself. Online dating is not for me. I think that as a general rule, myself included, the name of the game is to put a strong foot forward, to amplify traits in your personality that you think are attractive or interesting, but in the long run, this is never sustainable. You try to communicate yourself as something that you can only really be on your best days. What about when the honeymoon phase is over and you're comfortable with just chilling and being your normal self? What happens when it becomes clear that you're both only 20% of what you made yourself out to be on your Tinder profile? Is that not a giant waste of time and an overall shitty experience? People are layered and nuanced, and condensing them down into 6 photos and a sentence, it just isn't real. Goodbye forever, Tinder. See you next week.